What's up, YouTube? Zazubaar here, and I'm here to talk about something that people have been asking me about for a long time now. Ever since I started talking about the Legendary Pictures Godzilla movie, people have been asking me to talk about if I were to write the script for a Godzilla reboot, what would I do, the story I would tell. And I took that to heart, and for the past year, I've been working on a script for a movie called Godzilla Lives. And it's not finished yet, because it's a I'm trying to make it feature-length and epic, and I've been fixing it up wherever I can. And, it's not something that's going to be available to read soon, because I've been working on it for so long, and there's so much that I still have to do with it. But I figured I'll tell you guys my basic premise for what I like to call my Godzilla Trilogy. So, yeah, if I were to reboot Godzilla, I would start from the beginning and do it as a very close interlocking trilogy of films. And writing the script for Godzilla Lives, I just did a basic little description of each movie, as it continues for each movie. See, there are 3 movies I would do, and I'll just give you the titles for now, and then I'll go into detail about which each story would be and the characters and the monsters. So, like I said, the first movie would be called Godzilla Lives, and it would be a total 100% reboot. It would ignore 54 and basically start from 54, opening with a black and white scene of Godzilla attacking Tokyo in 1954, but telling it a little differently. Characters I would use that were from 54 would be Daisuke Sarazawa, Steve Martin, and Emiko. Who would be in the opening scene, and the opening scene would already have Tokyo pretty much in flames, and Godzilla already in the city, with Steve Martin doing a news broadcast about it, and him talking to Daisuke. Sarazawa has developed some sort of secretive weapon that he has to give to the military, because he's sure it'll kill Godzilla. Is it the Oxygen Destroyer? No. I decided not to go with the Oxygen Destroyer because I wanted something that was kind of relevant to today, and the Oxygen Destroyer is just a little bit too 50s scientific technology for me. So I decided to use something that I may get some hate for, because everyone knows that one of my favorite Godzilla movies is Godzilla vs. Biollante. And the weapon is the anti-nuclear energy bacteria, which I love. It's a brilliant concept, and I used it here. And, basically what happens is, the opening scene, Godzilla destroys Tokyo and, kills millions of people. And the military has no way to stop him. And the scene closes with just Tokyo engulfed in flames and Godzilla standing right in the center with flames engulfing him. Then the movie cuts to, excuse me, about 30 years later, and, excuse me. And it's the 1980s, and Godzilla's still around. The military was never, or the world was never able to stop him. He just kind of left Tokyo after a while. And the reason is just because we were still using a lot of nuclear weapons up until the 80s. That was when the Cold War didn't end until the 80s, so nuclear weapons were on people's minds through all those decades, so it just made sense to me that Godzilla never really died, that the idea of Godzilla would live on until the 80s. So I've been doing some research about the Cold War and pretty much the year that it pretty much ended. And that's the year and I'm not going to tell you the exact year, but because I don't have it out right now, but it was in the late 80s, and when the scene cuts, and Godzilla is fighting about a dozen submarines from both Russia, Japan, and the U.S. underwater, and there's the Godzilla's just being shot at with torpedoes by all sides, and he's just putting up his best fight, but he's having a hard time because of just how many subs there are, and he destroys a couple of them in the scene. But then we cut to above the waterline, and there's a boat there, and Sarazawa's on it, Steve Martin's on it, and basically Sarazawa didn't want to use the anti-nuclear energy bacteria, as we can see, since this plan that they're executing now is meant to destroy Godzilla. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to blow up a portion of the seafloor and try to knock Godzilla into the crack they create and then bury him. So they end up succeeding, and it's this big emotional scene, and and there's tons of news cameras, and they all say the same thing, that this is the end of Godzilla, and that the world can live in peace now. And they act like they actually killed Godzilla, even though everyone knows that Godzilla's not really dead as much as he is just kind of buried. The original title for this script was originally just called Godzilla 2012, and then just because I realized that wasn't very it was just kind of a weird title. Then I changed it to Godzilla Returns, but then I was like, oh, they already had a movie called Godzilla Returns, so I stuck with Godzilla Lives, because there's never been any Godzilla story or movie or anything or book that was called Godzilla Lives. So yeah, I decided to call it Godzilla Lives, and that's prevalent to the story, because then we cut to the year 2012, when the world has kind of forgotten about Godzilla and has just kind of moved on with its life, but they're still making the same mistakes, and they don't remember what the threat was like of Godzilla, or who's standing in, of course, for nuclear weapons. So we've just kind of forgotten about that, and we learn that the world is still using a lot of nuclear energy. And the movie opens with a nuclear accident in Japan. Now, I may get hate for this, but this was before what happened, the Japan earthquake crisis. When I wrote this, I swear. It wasn't an earthquake. Basically, it was just an industrial accident where a massive nuclear plant exploded. And it was so powerful that the radiation spread across the sea to where, all those years ago, Godzilla was buried under the seafloor, and the radiation is just kind of a little bit enough to wake him up, and he breaks out of the seafloor and is angry as hell and needs energy. Now, I had to, of course, set up at some point that this was a reboot for American audiences, so of course Godzilla has to attack an American city. So, right in that scene where they bury him, it's mentioned that it's about, 120 miles off the coast of California or something like that, where it's closer to America than it is to Japan. Now, I also did some research into the closest American city to Japan, and I was, of course, right when I chose it before, and it was San Francisco. So this movie is going to focus on Godzilla coming back to life, and attacking San Francisco, and just kind of showing the whole point of the movie is to show the world that we can never forget our horrors. Otherwise, we're just going to keep making the same mistakes. So Godzilla comes back to show humanity what it means to be threatened again. And the main character, the protagonist, who's a human being, is going to be Steve Martin Jr., who's the grandson of the original Steve Martin who witnessed Godzilla's attack in 1954, who's still alive, but of course very old, and he's kind of in a retirement home. And Steve Martin Jr. has he basically embodies the whole world, and that he's forgotten about Godzilla. And his character arc is about just kind of, he himself has to accept that Godzilla's back. So then, being proactive, he decides to show the world that Godzilla's back, and does all these he's a news reporter, and he does all these news reports about what happened from 1954 to the late 80s when Godzilla was supposedly killed. And he kind of shows the world, the world has a character arc with Steve Martin in learning that that we can't forget our horrors, we always have to remember them and then use them to better ourselves. That may sound corny, but that's just my idea. So that's the first film, Godzilla Lives. At the end of the movie, Godzilla isn't killed, he's just drawn back. Since the other one there's basically dual protagonists in this movie. The other protagonist is the grandson of Daisuke Serizawa, who in the script I just named Serizawa. It's kind of a mistake. So his name is just Serizawa in my script. I haven't given him a first name yet. And And he's of course the grandson of Daisuke Serizawa from the first film, who, in a bit of fan service in the script, I mentioned that during 1954 his eye got injured and he had his eye patch on. I don't know, I thought it was an interesting bit of fan service, since this movie really doesn't connect Godzilla to World War II. That was just kind of not in my original script, and it wasn't really my point. I didn't want to kind of bring World War II into it because there was just so much going on in my story. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but Godzilla is solo in the first movie only because no matter what Legendary does, I'm always going to stick with my idea that rebooting Godzilla for American audiences should have Godzilla alone first. I do want other monsters brought in. I just think that the first movie should focus on setting up Godzilla and worry about all this monster action in sequels. So the end of this film is Godzilla destroying San Francisco with this huge attack on San Francisco, looking for more nuclear energy to feed on. And that brings into the whole idea of the first film that Godzilla is feeding off humanity. Originally, I had an idea to do it as to change Godzilla a little bit, where he actually ate people. But I myself thought, okay, that's like a Roland Emmerich thing to do. Don't do that. So I kind of got mad at myself for even thinking of that. But so I just kept it with he has to feed on nuclear energy to survive. So he's just kind of destroying San Francisco and trying to move up and down the coast to find more nuclear energy to feed on. And the movie ends with the anti-nuclear energy bacteria being found in a government vault in Japan. And the grandson of Daisuke Serizawa, who the original Daisuke Serizawa dies in this film during Godzilla's initial attack. He's living in San Francisco with his grandson, and he gets killed. And when Godzilla attacks, and what happens? Daisuke gets really angry and stops being this objective scientist, which he's been through the whole movie, and becomes just a totally three-dimensional character at the end, and just decides to destroy this monster, and in the end sacrifices himself, like in the original Godzilla, by loading an anti-nuclear energy bacteria warhead into a RPG and shooting it at Godzilla. And Godzilla doesn't die, because, again, we have a whole trilogy to cover here. He just kind of... It just weakens him enough to the point where he leaves. And he goes back into the sea. And we're set up in the end of the credits, it says Godzilla will return. And then we have our sequel. The middle part of the trilogy, which I couldn't help myself. I had to remake one of my favorite movies of all time. The second movie is called Godzilla vs. King Kong. And it basically ties directly into what happened at the end of the first film. A large corporation has been exploiting the destruction Godzilla caused in San Francisco, and the CEO is planning to do something that he says will make the company heroes and rich beyond all dreams. He says he knows a way that he can kill Godzilla and yet make millions at the same time. He sends a giant expedition, which has already been set up, but we only see one giant ship going. And Steve Martin is also in this movie too, Steve Martin Jr. And sneaks onto a ship for this corporation, which is going to some sort of tropical island in the South Pacific. And he doesn't know why. All he's hearing about is just they're bringing back the big one. And they're not all. There's this mystery behind what exactly they're going after, and Godzilla is not really in this movie. In the first act, he doesn't really kind of become prevalent until the second act. In the first act, Godzilla's there. He's just being monitored by the Navy for now, and I thought it might be cool if in the second act, a real introduction to Godzilla is this giant battle between him and Kong in the middle of the ocean. Anyway, so what happens is Steve Martin is taken to Skull Island, and which is, of course, the island where this corporation is sending these giant ships to. And for some reason, I really wanted to give Bruce Campbell a cameo in my story. So I wrote this scientist character, who's just kind of also a great white hunter. and who the corporation hired to basically lead the expedition on Skull Island, since of course Skull Island is filled with not only the eighth wonder of the world, but also dinosaurs, and they've already lost tons of workers for their corporation. I didn't want to do natives only because I thought it would be silly. The island is uninhabited, except for Kong and the dinosaurs. And by the time we see it, it's already heavily been like built up by this corporation who has like almost an airport and a town built on the beach. And it's kind of a makeshift little tents and just one giant long strip of dirt that's considered like a runway. Anyway, so Bruce Campbell plays the scientist, and I would like to have Bruce Campbell play the scientist because he's just supposed to be kind of a cameo. And he gets killed right before they get off Skull Island, but he's basically against what the corporation is doing, but he can't he has this mentality where he can't help himself from wanting to see something that no one's ever seen before and hunting it. And it plays into what the corporation wants Kong to do that's involved with Godzilla. This corporation has just been trying to make money off what Godzilla did to San Francisco. Just supplying medical supplies to the people of San Francisco as it's been totally decimated by Godzilla. Just making donations to the military in their effort to kill Godzilla. And they have their own little plan for it. What they want to do is bring Kong back to America and build this giant, huge arena in the Midwest where there's open land. And what they want to do is bid off seats to watch the greatest fight ever in this giant stadium between Godzilla and Kong. And initially, Steve Martin is trying to stop it, but he fails, of course. They find out that he's stowed away on the ship, and he's put in the brig. And we get our first glimpse of Kong being captured by Bruce Campbell's character, and he gets killed by Kong.